My mom and dad, in the late 40s, I think it was, they moved to Garden Crescent. So you literally, there was a little pathway that went from their front door into Park Lane, and then you slip over here. So my mom and dad were always outdoor pursuit and athletic. My mom was into speed skating and did well provincially. And my dad was a lifeguard and very physically involved in sports. So common sense prevailed. And they ended up becoming members when the initiation fee went from $50 to $100. So that was a big step. And then I remember when I was born in December of 1949, and when I was about 4 or 5, that's when we became members. So they knew of it right in front of them. And my earliest memories were when I was 4 or 5. Ethel was the one that ruled the roost. And any of you chicks step out of line, you knew that you had Ethel to face. And so she kept everything sane. I think she went a little bit loony eventually because we all did a good job on her. So you knew that if you had any inklings, they were shut down immediately. And because the hallways down to the young girls' locker room and the other things were not like the modernized version that we have. And so that were my early memories. I learned how to swim through Ken McKenna. And then I got my bronze medallion with Bill Patrick, who was the basketball coach at Western. And I took badminton lessons from Dave Follensby. And that was when he was the badminton and tennis teacher. And then eventually Dave became the general manager or something, a senior position. So I'd always go up to him and say, Dave, did it? And he said, you can no longer call me Dave. You must call me Mr. Follensby. I said, and I didn't understand why. So I learned everything. I took skating lessons from, is it Winnie Silverthorne? It was Miss Silverthorne, and prim and proper. And I took curling lessons from Mark Houston in high school and in junior high school. And then, and the badminton, so I was in part of the badminton league, the skating, when they had the skating exhibition, and we were all in themes, different age groups were in themes, and they had people coming, taking our measurements, and voila, these costumes showed up shortly before we would go to the corral for the big kaboomba. And so, in those days, it was curling and the stampeders. There was none of this He-Man modern day sports. So you zeroed in on those things. So everything in sports that was offered here, I didn't take tennis. That's the only thing I didn't take, but I had lessons in everything. So this was our home away from home, and yet we lived exactly 2 blocks south. My dad, when he retired, I think it was close to retirement or around retirement, before or just after he retired, he decided you needed to have a Sunday morning Sinners men's league in curling. While the wives go off to church, and instead of bugging the husbands, they could come and sin in the curling alley. And so my dad was the head sinner. And I somehow he made a tin can trophy, whatever. And so these fellows would show up, on Sunday morning for the Sinners League. And so we knew where to find Dad, because my dad didn't drink or smoke, but he ate, drank, showered, and saunaed here daily. He didn't end up using our bathroom, but he would come, and in his retirement, it was fun to him watching him do this. He would come and do aquasize 3 times a week, Nautilus, the fitness thing 2 or 3 times a week, and he would curl 4 to 5 times a week. And one of them might be substituting for the ladies' league because there wasn't enough women's to sub. So they'd knock on his door and say, "Can you come for the ladies tomorrow morning?" And he'd show up for the ladies' league, tomorrow morning. And he was just like a kid on a treadmill, and I told her a little while ago that he was so physically fit that my mother and I had this private black humor joke. She said, "Dear, I don't have as much energy because I'll probably go before he does. And can you, make sure you don't get upset. I want him to remarry if that makes him happy. But dear, when he passes, he's so physically fit, we'll probably find his body in Saskatchewan." And so that was fun for me to see him embrace, and all the big decisions were made in the sauna room, a bunch of different buddies he'd run into. And he and Lyle Leverett, who lived just a couple of doors down, would play pool, 2 or 3 times a week. I mean, he had a full schedule here. Because there was a lot of us that were classmates that belonged to the club, we'd all show up for the badminton ladder, and then the weekend badminton ladder, and then there was swimming, and there was skating, and there was bowling. We all showed up. So, and not anybody in particular, but because of the group dynamics of doing that in those days of innocence, compared to a few more spark plugs now. I think it probably prevented a few people in the group from becoming juvenile delinquents, because it was so friendship and family, and is family oriented. So that I had my beginnings of everything. And then it was natural to come down and do whatever you're going to do. It was just part of family. It was family. And I became friends with some of the parents, the kids of parents that were in the curling league or the bowling league or whatever. And so I ended up going from doing bowling as a kid to joining the ladies bowling league and the mixed bowling league. And we won the championships in 1999. We came out of the blue, and I said to the girls when we were going to go up to accept the trophy, I said, "Look, if you see any of the people at the luncheon, say, 'Who are those guys?' I said, 'Don't take it personally.'" We as individuals or together would come down for the swim. That would be a big deal. And because of my mother and father's very heavy involvement in curling, we knew backwards, forwards, and inside out everything about curling, and even extending to when they had the Canadian Championships, Women's Championship at the Corral during Teachers' Convention. So I spent all the Teachers' Convention down there watching the Canadian curling thing, and my mom was in charge of it. There was, when I was young, my brother and I would come down and we'd swim. And they used to have a high diving board and low diving board in both indoor and outdoor. So I thought my brother could do no wrong. I went through that period of time quickly. And he said, "Marilyn," he said, how about you go do a belly flop off the low diving board? And if you do that, I'll buy you a hamburger. So, clueless, you can do no wrong. I went and did a belly flop, and it hurt like hell. And I came out of that water yelling, like I didn't swear, but I came out yelling, and I ran after him. And he said, okay, I'll buy you 2 hamburgers. So we went, and he didn't buy a hamburger. He was going to buy a hamburger for himself, but he bought 2 hamburgers for me. And then he said, well, we might as well go home now. So we walked 2 blocks to get it home. We get it home, we walk into the kitchen, and my mother had just made and prepared hamburgers for us. And he pulled me into the den, and he said, don't you dare tell her what I asked you to do, or else. I said, oh, all right. And the thing that really bugs me about the story now is that he didn't have to eat 3 hamburgers. He got to have the one at home, free and easy, and I'm imploding. And I might have been in high school, not the first year of university, high school. My brother and his friend Keith Dick, Steve and Keith, they were both 6'2" and both blonde, natural, really blonde hair. So they got long legs and whatever, and they decided to register themselves anonymously with different names in the girls' swim meet that there was going to take place. And so they registered their name. I don't know how they did it, but instead of being Steve Topley and Keith Dick, they were Ellabella Cruikshank and Jesse Snodgrass. And they were registered. And so there used to be steep stairways down to the indoor pool. So they could hear the announcements, lane 1, such and such. So they heard their names. They came, and my brother got my sister's 1-piece light gray swimsuit, and they tucked their parts in, and down they went. And they got on the starting blocks, and boom, and they were just like, zap, and of course they came in first, and then the girls were going, what the hell, and so the charmers, they said, oh, well, you still get credit for who actually came first, The one story that I have that was different for me was when they had the sports lounge, and I invited Julie, a friend of mine, in for lunch. We went to the sports lounge, so we were at a single table. And then beside us, there was a big round table, and there was one gentleman about 85 years old, rotund, but he had really gentle and positive energy. And he had these wide, flat-lipped soup, a big soup, instead of a little cup. He had, and so he would scoop towards the soup, and it was just so gentle, and, scoop towards the soup. And so on the other side of him, there was tables for 4s. And there was 2 couples at one table, and suddenly they got up and they were looking all over the place and getting edgy and, nervous. And so, I looked around and I looked at them. So I got up and I walked towards them, and I said, did somebody lose their contact lens? And they said, no, when the waiter came back with the billfold, there was no credit card. And so, So I went back, and Julie said, well, what do you want to make a... And there was two waiters that were panicking. They were panicking, and they were panicking. And then finally they settled down and sat down. And the 2 male waiters were, edgy. And so Julie said, well, what do you want to make a bet that the credit card fell off and went underneath the round table on the opposite side of where the old man is sitting? I said, probably. So I got up, and I was going around the back of the man to look underneath the table on that side. But as I got around him, you know, his trousers would gape open, and down into the abyss of his crack was the said credit card. So without thinking, in a split second, the said hand went down to the credit card, pulled it out of the crack, and I pulled it up. And they saw this and they lost it. They lost it. And I'm sitting here with, you know, the sanitized credit card, and they lost it. And suddenly the two waiters went from panic to, my girlfriend lost it, they lost it. And during the whole time, the gentleman never knew I had my hands in his pants. And so I just stood there like this, the Statue of Liberty, and so, I said, congratulations, and then, and gave it to them. I think it was about the summer of 1965, because he became a civil engineer, went into and graduated in 69. So the summer leading up to his first year, I think, is when he was a lifeguard here. And he ended up saving a 9-year-old boy. I think he was about 9 years old. And the story was, Steve was in the outdoor pool watching the pool. And a member had brought his son in and his nephew in to swim. But the young uncle never bothered to check to see what his nephew's swimming abilities were. So the uncle was in the indoor pool with his son, and the nephew was at the bottom of the pool in the outdoor pool. And my brother looked down, saw him, he literally was flatlined in the bottom of the pool in the deep end. And my brother dove in, got him up. And then Margaret, I don't remember, we called her Marg or Margaret, and she lived in Elder Park. And I don't remember her last name, but she and Steve, they did everything by the book. And resuscitation and mouth to mouth, or whatever they had to do, procedural. And it worked great. And so it ended up being in the news, 11:15 news, that night. And so there were different members or, board members came and thanked him the next day and whatever. So, and he wasn't full of himself about it. He just, it was obvious. It's just instantaneous. My dad was, that evening, he was on the 9 to 11 o'clock draw for curling. And so they had finished playing their curling game. And I don't know how my dad knew. I think it was sticking his nose out. The fire came whipping down the stairway and went past the bowling alley and ripped into the, I call it sort of the lounge. There's the diner, a counter where you bought your Coca-Cola for 4 cents. And then there's all the skating observation, all in one big long room. And then you hit the curling. So I don't know whether it's because he could smell the smoke and then he stuck his head out, but he went racing through all the rooms and up in and snaked through the locker room and said, "You've got to get out of here right now." And of course, there's a fire. There's a big fire in the club, and you have to get out now. And of course, how often will somebody come up to you, "Hey, Suzette, there's a big fire in the club. You got to get out now." And so, yeah. And so he said every time he went to each person, said, "You've got to get out." He said, "Well, just wait a minute. I'll put my boots away, lock them up, and then it'll burn down, and then off you go." So he said they were just sort of, it's 11:15 or whatever at night. And out of the blue, somebody's saying, "You've got to get out of here. The club's on fire." And so they were, it didn't quite register in those seconds. So they said, "Well, just hang on. I'm just putting my boots away, lock it up." And then off they go and leave the club. And so my mom was, at the same time, had been visiting my grandmother and aunt who had a house on Frontenac Avenue, and she was leaving late. And you could see the flames up above the hilltop of the old Earl Grey School. And then the flames were just sky high. It consumed the whole sky. And so she could see flames as she was traveling homeward from Frontenac Avenue. She said, "Oh my gosh, I hope that's not the club." And then she realized fairly quickly it's the club. So my dad got home, she got home, and they made a decision, because this would be not something we would never see before. They woke the three of us kids up, had us put on our shoes and bathrobe. We came out, and here's the club, and the flames, and this is at 12:30 at night. The flames, like, I didn't know what a tsunami was then, but it was like the flames ate up the whole sky. And then I knew as a young one that it wasn't danger for us, but it was so monstrous. It just, like, the tsunami went up into the sky instead of a wave coming this way. So you couldn't see anything but the flames. And I'll never forget it. And so I thought, I knew it wasn't a dream. And I said, well, and I just looked at my dad and he said, "I'm sorry, dear, but it's the claim call." And so we stood there for about 15 minutes and just it was hypnotizing. Even before the pandemic, the ground crew workers, the people that are in contact with us, and they're your ambassadors, the upper bosses, ambassadors of goodwill. And they've always been fantastic. And during this pandemic, everybody had to, ad nauseum and with a lot of pressure and stress. The bosses at the top, like, I can't even imagine, because I was involved in, I was a teacher, and I was involved in doing local, provincial, and national conferences on how to empower kids to believe in themselves. And I've been involved in organizing national conferences and things at Banff and whatever. So I know what goes on behind all the decisions. I don't know the details of the pandemic one, but I know by just observing, as an example, I had injuries and I needed to do swimming the first summer of the pandemic. And the clockwork was unbelievable. And I never heard the employees and lifeguards complain about anything. And they had to go through extra stuff. Everybody in every department, including, and it must be remembered, the people that clean the club in the graveyard shift. Everybody in every department, the cafe, the Argyle, the sports counter, the pro shop, all the ground crew have been unbelievable in me growing up, and exceptional. And so I think the people that, all the ground crew are my heroes. And it's not I'm acknowledging the bosses at the top. and recognizing the tornadoes that you have to go through in abiding by rules and regulations. And the ground crew, they always, in every department of the club, when I would talk with people, they said they would always make sure, are you taken care of? Is there anything else I can do for you? And do it with a smile. It's coming home to my second home, in a nutshell. And for me, because my husband had severe cancer for 6 years, and it was spread throughout his whole body during the pandemic. So he would say to me when we had that first summer of swimming, I said, I want to stay here with you. And he said, Marilyn, you've got to go. You've got to go and do, I want you to do 4 swims a week. Leave me and do 4 swims, And so when he eventually passed away on Thanksgiving weekend of 2020, I was taking care of myself and taking care of him. And he said, you got to promise me that you'll make sure you take care of yourself. I said, well, I just go to the club and I'll be taken care of. Last Thanksgiving, as an example, I don't want to feel morbid about the 1 year anniversary of my husband. And the turkey thing was here on the 1 year anniversary. And so I invited 3 of my girlfriends to come with me. He said, we're going to celebrate Renzo and tell naughty stories. And so within the ability of what was available and try to make it meaningful, they said, oh yeah, that's, So it was really great. So I made sure we came here, not somewhere else, to do that, because this is where family is.